it's important, okay? But how do I get better at it? All right, so what we're gonna talk about here is a kind of a step system, and we can go as complex or as simple as we'd like for this, okay? So I'm gonna talk first a little bit about the simple, then we're gonna go a little bit more complex, all right? So testing our max heart rate and understanding and knowing our max heart rate. Now, there are places that you can go to do this, okay? There are people in town that run things where you can go and test your max heart rate and your VO2 max. You can do a treadmill test, you can do a bike test, you can do a row test. I don't think you can do a swimming test, but there's places that you can go that will give you really detailed charts for this. So that's a little bit more on the complex, okay? Or you guys can just pop out to a track on Sunday, bring a couple stopwatches, and or bring somebody, if you really want to go nuts, like bring somebody with a stethoscope who can take your heart rate for you, okay? And what we can do, there's a couple different tests. I've put one on here. There's multiple ones that you can do. But really what we're going to try to do is ramp up in intensity basically to a max effort. And then we're going to start testing our heart rate immediately when that effort's done for 30 seconds in 30-second intervals going out to about 3 minutes or so. And we're tracking that drop down of where we got to at peak and how quickly it comes back to what would be a moderate baseline, okay? And that's pathing, kind of tracking our fitness level, okay? So let's say we do this test today, and we go out and our peak heart rate gets to 192, and at 3 minutes, it's at 140. Then next year we test, and our peak heart rate is again at 192, but after 3 minutes, our heart rate has gotten down to 110. We've become more fit. Everybody see how that works? Okay, we're able to recover faster. Our our heart is being more efficient. It doesn't have to work as hard, and so it's able to slow and calm itself down a little bit faster. Okay, so this is one of the ways that you can do that. So once we know our max heart rate, then we can start to track that inside of workouts and make sure that we're staying inside of that aerobic zone. And the cool part about this is there's kind of two edges to this. Once you know your max heart rate, and you know we don't want to go above 75% of our max heart rate so that we're staying in that aerobic zone, what we can do then is when we're pacing, we can start to learn that for me, and this is my actual case, at a 150 or a 152 on the rower, I can stay aerobic. If I go faster than that, I'm going to go anaerobic, okay? So I can start to learn, these are my paces where I can stay calm, controlled, okay? For you guys who are running, you guys who are going to be doing triathlons, super important to know. This is sort of my baseline pace where I'm staying aerobic. And if I start to go above this pace, I'm going to start burning different energy systems, and I'm going to be capped out. I'm going to start feeling depleted, okay? And I need to understand that the peaks and valleys that come with this, I'll draw you guys a chart here in a second, the peaks and valleys that come with this are going to lead to me being suboptimal in performance, okay? All right, and you guys see this all the time. If you guys have ever come here for the open, and you see people do the open workout, almost every year you get a lot of people who go out a little too hot. Gone out a little too hot, Rye? Yeah, that was Nick, gone out a little too hot. Nick's notorious for going out a little too hot. It's kind of his MO, all right? Right, so, yeah, so 60 to 75%. Right, that's our optimal zone to increase. It's not the only way. All of our systems use the aerobic system, right? But that's the most optimal way to do that. And so and we'll talk about how our goal is to be able to stay in that zone but increase the intensity, which for you would be pace. So if we can increase the pace but stay in that zone, that's how we're being optimal in our training performance, okay? Yeah. So, linear progression, that's my best Frenchy walking picture that I could find. Linear progression, okay? What linear progression means is that next week is going to be harder than this week. The week after that is going to be harder than next week. Every week gets a little more challenging, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to find our aerobic zone, okay? And you guys can do this two ways. I'm going to talk about this mainly as it pertains to CrossFitters, but we're also going to talk about how this can pertain to aerobic athletes or endurance athletes also, okay? For the CrossFit athlete, the easiest way for us to start to get better at this is to commit ourselves to low zone 1 and maybe zone 2 aerobic activity on our rest days, okay? Every study ever done, it's one of the cool things about this aerobic stuff as it pertains to recovery, is all the studies kind of agree, which is very, very rare in terms of sports science stuff. But all the studies are going to agree on the fact that on a rest day, you are going to recover better if you are active. If you do something that's going to cause blood flow, cause your oxidative system to start to massage itself, okay? And you're going to start pumping some of that crap, the lactic acid and all the stuff that builds up in your muscles, and start to pump some of that out, okay? And you're going to also, like we talked about, massage those arteries in the heart, massage those arteries throughout the body to start to increase the gap. And that has massive, massive benefits all throughout your body from all different sources. But just understand that it's going to make you feel better the next day when you come and work out. That's what you need to know, okay? So if, let's say we're a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday person, we take Thursday off. We go Friday, Saturday, we take Sunday off. Then on Thursday and Sunday, our rest days, what we would want to do is usually as early as possible, we would want to get out and massage our oxidative, I keep saying oxygenative, that's not a word, our oxidative system, okay, or our aerobic system, all right? So we're trying to get out. I like to think about first starting low intensity, okay? Why walking a dog? Anybody? It forces us to stay slower, right? It's something for us that you're not gonna go out and want to have the desire to go harder. Okay, so we put Coach Mitchell out here for endurance class, and all of a sudden he's next to other people. He gets all like, I want to go faster than these people, and I want to win, right? So he goes a little too fast, okay? And when we get in those spaces sometimes, we get out of what's best for us individually, okay? When we go out and we walk a dog, typically we're doing that maybe more for the dog or half and half, okay? So we're not super worried about how fast we're going, okay? We're not really gonna get into this kind of zone where we feel like, oh my gosh, I've gotta go faster, right? And we can have a much better control of our heart rate. So I like that as a good way for us to start. Now we can increase the intensity a couple different ways for this. So we can go faster, right? We could start wearing a weight vest or a backpack, okay? We could carry a farmer's carry, like a light dumbbell, like 10, 15 pounds, doesn't need to be a lot. In the alternative hand, then we can switch, right, and go that way. You can do small little stints of a light jog in between to start to increase the intensity a little bit, making sure that we don't start going up into those higher heart rate zones. We could carry the dog for a little bit. If you guys are like Blitz craps out at about 20 minutes, and you have to carry her a lot in the summer, okay? So that works out pretty well for us, just ends up being, you know, natural intensity gaining. But what we would want to do is think about our timelines on that, okay? So you can also increase by time, okay? And like we talked about, what we want to think about is we want to be in that heart rate zone, right? So for me, that's going to be 135 to 155, okay? I'm going to use my running max heart rate for this to stay in those zones, okay? So 135 to 155 beats per minute is about the zone that I want to stay in while I'm going out and walking blitz. And as we go, I might start my first day at 25 minutes. The next week I would go 25 to 30 minutes. Next week I might go 30 to 35 minutes. Hey, look at that. And so on, okay, so we can start to increase. At a certain point, we usually are going to get beyond what we need to train for. Now, obviously, if we're gonna be doing a triathlon, we're gonna need to train up into that hour and a half, 2 hour, 3 hour zone at some point. And this would be how you guys would wanna do that, right? And start kind of making sure that we stay in that aerobic system as long as possible. But for most of us, 30 to 45 minutes is going to be plenty for us to start to kind of expand that opportunity there for us, okay? So this is the lowest hanging fruit for people, right? Because a lot of people, we get a lot of people came in, we did CrossFit Total on Wednesday this week, and everyone's like, awesome, lifted heavy, but now I'm kind of sore. Thursday, man, I'm gonna just sit on my butt, sleep, hang out, not move at all, right? And that's the wrong answer for a lot of different reasons, but we're also missing out an opportunity for us to grow our aerobic zone kind of 2 days in a row now, right? So we do want to be thinking about using this as an opportunity during our rest days, okay? And so what we can then think about is if we're focusing more on the endurance stuff, if this is a focus for us, right? And what I told John just now a little bit ago, I said, John, you can join us for endurance. If I want this to be a focus for John, we would think about maybe taking him out one day from things that would be more anaerobic in nature, and we would insert one day that would be more aerobic in nature, okay? So we do a 1 in, 1 out. So we might do something like 4 days a week of CrossFit, 2 days a week of zone 1 rest training, and 1 day a week of zone 2 or zone 3, what we were just doing outside endurance work, okay? So more dedicated work in there. Does that make sense? So this is a good way for us to start the linear progression, and you can take this all the way up into, I want to compete in an Ironman, okay? All the way through by the linear progression on this, by making sure that we stay inside of those zones and we're increasing the intensity. And all we need to do is think about like dropping our pace by something nominal, 2 seconds per mile, right? 3 seconds per mile. right? And then see, can I stay in that aerobic zone while I'm doing that, okay? And then continue to train, come back, test it again. Can I run that pace and stay aerobic, okay? And that's kind of our goal for those. And then this is the big thing. This is one of the things that's come out. This is relatively new, which is really, really cool. This is OPEX and James Fitzgerald really started this with some of their games athletes in maybe 2016 or so. It was really popular with Marcus Philly, who is Ryan's inspiration for life currently. Yeah, that's pretty close. And what they started to do was they started to look at it and they started to say, okay, we know that on rest days, it is better to do light aerobic activity. And we also know that our athletes are naturally bad at doing physical therapy and corrective movement exercises on their own. How can we take those two things, combine them into one, and knock out two birds with one stone? And so what they started to do is they started to take and do what's called mixed modal aerobic training, okay? Or mixed modal, they just call it MMT now. And so this is kind of what we think about this. So repeated movement patterns, okay? So let's say we add a ton of running. We're just gonna run for everything, okay? Repeated movement patterns are gonna cause overuse injuries. It's just fact, okay? If we do the same movement pattern over and over and over and over and over again, those movement patterns will become fatigued, okay? So what we need to be thinking about during those, knowing that that is going to happen, is we either need to vary the exercises and the movements that we do, or we need to be thinking about doing the corrective exercises and the physical therapy required to make sure that those muscles, joints, and everything are healing up and staying strong in between, okay? So when I run, I tend to kick my foot out here. So I internally rotate, okay? That causes me a bunch of IT band issues, right? And a lot of that's gonna be caused by my ankles, so I get a lot of runner's knee inflammation kind of down in here, iliotibial band syndrome, okay? I know that, right? I've got a slew of exercises from Jenny on how to correct that, okay? The best way for me to do that, if I'm gonna go and spend the time, is why not knock out two birds with one stone? I can do that physical therapy training and do it in a way where I'm staying aerobic, okay? And so we'll talk about that here in a second. But what we see is these common overuse injuries. Raise your hand if you've had some inflammation in your life. Everybody raises their hand, right? We all have inflammation, right? And the more that we cause the same repeated movement patterns, and the worse our movement patterns are, right? If we're tight, if we're immobile, right, and we are repeating those movement patterns, then we're going to be causing more stress, more inflammation on those joints. Thus, we need to do more things to flush out that inflammation and also correct the movement patterns, okay? So it becomes even more important to do these things, all right? So this will help you kind of do these. So you can fix your movement patterns, rebuild your joints, decrease inflammation, and train the aerobic system all at once, okay? So this is kind of like, this has become sort of the gold standard for games athletes now. And again, this is kind of optimal. So you guys are probably all familiar with these corrective exercises, right? We do these in class quite a bit, okay? So mixed modal aerobic training, right? What we're going to talk about this is making sure that we are involving some of this in our kind of daily week. And this can be practiced, or this can be done inside of a CrossFit class, which we'll talk about here in a second. This can be done inside of a CrossFit class if you're really paying attention to your exertion levels, okay? So we were talking about that RPE before, making sure we stay way away from the 20, right? Like don't even go close to it. Don't even sniff it. Look at people over there doing 20 and say, I'm trying to do half that, okay? And that's kind of the goal, all right? If we're thinking about where we are going to be doing something involved with a lot of consistent movement patterns. So if we are going to run anything that's going to be probably more than a 5K, or biking anything more than maybe 30 miles, anything like that, that is the same movement pattern repeated over, we absolutely need to be making sure that we are doing some corrective exercises for those movement patterns and knowing what our movement patterns cause for that, right? So if we have knee pain, if we have back pain, if we have hip pain, understanding where that's coming from, why it's happening, and how we can strengthen the smaller, more stabilizing muscles to correct that. So here's an example for running, okay? So we can talk about each of these specifically, but if we think about what breaks down over a marathon run, your posture, your hips, our strides not going as much, right? So you think about we're not reaching, we're not pulling with the hamstring anymore, okay? So we're maybe plopping, maybe our knees start to cave in. Who's ever seen a runner that's kind of like that, right? Foot comes in, now we're doing damage to knee, ankle, hip, okay? When posture goes bad, now we're low back, okay? So we get these 3 or 4 things that start to go bad, and we know that that's going to happen over a long enough timeline, okay? If I just keep making you run, just keep running, just keep going, at a certain point, you're gonna start seeing that person. They're gonna get to here, all right, and they're just gonna be just like this, right? And everything, and that entire chain has completely broken down, okay? And once that happens, we need to be thinking about what happened first and how we can make sure that we are building those systems up so that it maybe, instead of that happening at 10,000 steps, that happens at 12,000 steps, okay, or 14,000 steps. So we push that ball a little bit down the road. Everybody is going to have an intensity or a time where they break down. It's an impossibility not to, okay? Human body has limits, right? But what we need to do is be thinking about how we can push that ball further, okay? By strengthening up some of these systems and making sure that as we're doing some of these corrective exercises, we're going at the issues that are breaking down on our bodies as we go through those repeated movement patterns, okay? So these are just some examples, right? Just some of my favorites, okay? But this is this would get you for like hips, ankles, low back posture, shoulders, all those things. That's kind of the big piece that we think about adding in, and there's a thing called Around the World that OPEX and James Fitzgerald and Marcus Philly kind of created, which is a 60-minute EMOM version of this, and they actually alternate a corrective physical therapy exercise with an aerobic exercise. So it'd be something like you do your lateral goblet step-ups, then you row for a minute. Then you do your single leg glute bridges, then you bike for a minute. Then you do your depth drops, then you go and walk or jog for a minute. And they alternate those two. And the reason is because then you can really start to throttle yourself up or down on the machines as needed to make sure that you're staying right at the heart rate that you want to, okay? And you watch these guys go through this, they're here like every 10, 15 seconds to make sure that their heart rate's not getting out of control. Because sometimes these can really start to make people struggle and get their heart rate up quite a bit, okay? Cool. All right, so this is kind of how I would think about how to create our own, okay? So you guys can think about what domain you guys want to be getting fitter in, okay? So I want to be a better runner. I'm not great at running. I don't like running. So I'm going to really focus on running for now, okay? So we think about how do we get better at running, okay? Well, we develop better leg muscles, better stride, better form, okay? More power, more speed, better aerobic system, right? That's probably pretty much it, okay? So if we get better at each of those things, then we are going to be a better runner, okay? So you can start to think about what's going to stop me from doing that, right? Well, when I sprint a lot, I get a lot of knee pain. Cool. So what we need to do then is we need to go and talk to a physical therapist or somebody who kind of knows what they're talking about. Say, hey, I want you to watch me run from straight on. You can always video yourself, right? I taught myself sort of all of CrossFit by just videoing myself and watching compared to people who are much better than me, right? And then just doing that 1,000 times over and over again, okay? So you can do the same thing, right? Here's Usain Bolt, here's me, okay? It's like, wow, that looks totally different, okay? And so see what happens, right? And so you can see clear as day that this happens when I start to run distance, okay? That foot flares and kicks out. So you can start to see that. So I can show this picture of that Dr. Alm took of me one time running. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I took it to Jenny. She's like, oh yeah. She's like, that's super common. She's like, your glutes is not firing. You're not keeping that external rotation the way you need to. You need to strengthen up that because that's just breaking down on you. Cool, right? So she gave me a series of exercises to help keep this position better as I'm going through running. And I have to think about it, right? So I have to change my movement pattern a little bit. So you can develop a series of those corrective exercises to fix some of those issues, okay? For some of us, it's stride length and power, which is a different training mechanism, okay, to start getting better at that. But you want to sort of develop a plan. And then the other option, obviously, is we can go in and we can look and just Google, overtraining running, right? Or common injuries associated with running, right? And start to see that like knee tendonitis, shin splints, stress fractures are going to probably be your top 3, right? So we see these things, we know they're going to come up. How can we start to combat those things, okay? And you can start to look up each of those. How do I stop stress fractures, right? There's all kinds of different ways that we can start to pay attention to some of those overuse injuries and make sure that we're staying away from those, knowing that we're going to be going in, increasing our mileage each week, week after week. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And then this is what we were thinking about, kind of bringing it all, wrapping it all together. So you would take those physical therapy exercises, right? I think Jenny gave me 2 different days, 4 exercises per day, okay? 2 days a week. And I would put those together and I would perform those at a moderate pace with something like maybe a light bike or maybe walking, whatever I feel like I can do, but stay in that aerobic zone, wear a heart rate monitor and just double check on my heart rate, making sure that I stay aerobic for somewhere in the 30 to 40 minute range as I do those physical therapy exercises, okay? That, in my opinion, is the best way to start to increase that circle, right? Increase our overall fitness level, okay? While making sure that we are also not beating down the same movement patterns over and over and over again, okay? So if we're doing things like CrossFit, okay, we do a lot of squats, right? We do a lot of lunge work and we do a lot of overhead stuff, okay? So you guys can be thinking about how can I start to strengthen up that overhead position without pressing, holding barbells and doing overhead squats and doing those things, okay? Well, I could do scapjacked. Crossover symmetry, couldn't think of the word. I can come over here and do crossover symmetry. In between each movement, I'm gonna pop on the bike and I'm gonna do 1 minute of bike, okay? Soft. And I think there's 6 to 8 exercises on there, okay? Do a few sets of those. Awesome, that's my 20 to 30 minute work for the day. Gotten my scap stronger, built better shoulder stability, done some physical therapy, corrective exercises, and I also rode the bike, massaged that oxidative system. I'm gonna just screw all that up. Oxidative system, and improve my aerobic capacity kind of all in one 20, 30 minute foul swoop. That's sort of where like our gold standard is at for this, okay? Yeah, uh-huh. This would be the mixed modal, right, exactly, yeah, this would be the mixed modal, right. So 1, 2 times a week, and this would, for most people, I would tell you to just put this right in on a rest day or whatever your lowest intensity day is going to be during your week. If you guys are a 6-day-a-week person, you can handle that well. This would be your 7th day a week, right? So yeah, good question. So I think it's up.